How's it going, everyone? It seems like every few months there's a new article on NEVS that comes out, and it's usually not any good news, and I would think that today's video is not particularly any more good news, rather more on the side of bad news, but I will get into that in a minute. Before we get into this video, I do want to mention that my 9.5 wagon is for sale. I am located in Phoenix, Arizona. A video going over all the details of that car as well as the ad itself can be found in the top corner up here. So if you're interested, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'd love to see it go to a Saab enthusiast and not just some random person who won't actually care for it. To get to the topic of today's video, NEVS. NEVS, if you are completely unaware, stands for National Electric Vehicle Sweden. I've made a short series of videos on them in the past. At this point, I really just need to find them all and put them in a playlist so people who haven't seen them all can watch and get a full backstory on what's been going on. But pretty much when Saab went out of business at the end of 2011, there are a few companies here and there that ended up buying Saab for short periods of time, and now the current company that owns Saab, or the rights to Saab, no one owns the name Saab because Saab still exists as an aerospace company who makes a lot of military equipment and things like that. No one owns the Saab car name per se. NEVS does not own that, at least. So NEVS is basically has been trying for the better part of the last half decade, maybe even longer actually, to make an electric version of the 9.3. So it's probably been at least 3 years since I made my first video when we first saw information on this EV 9.3. We saw some photos of it and how it pretty much just looked like a slightly more modern version of the last 9.3, no real big changes. You could tell it was definitely still on the same chassis and probably shared about 80% of the same exterior parts, at least. Obviously it was an EV, so everything mechanical was different. But ever since then, there's been a lot of promises that have not been fulfilled. So NEVS, around that same time, started exploring with the idea of autonomous vehicles, something completely outside of anything that resembles a Saab, something completely unrelated to the 9.3. And they seem to, after a year or two, kind of ditch the whole EV 9.3 thing. There were rumors I saw that, and some of you have actually told me in comments in previous NEVS videos, that you've seen a NEVS 9.3 on the road in Sweden, but I've only been told that there's like 10 of them, and there's no factual information. All the articles I've read have said there's no hard information saying X amount of NEVS 9.3s were produced, or this or that. So it's pretty safe to assume that they never really fully went into production. So where does that leave NEVS now? Well, their current owner, Evergrande Group, or Evergrande, however you want to pronounce it, is in massive debt. So they are looking to sell NEVS, possibly. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is, believe it or not, another company that owns some of Saab's dead remains is in crippling debt. But I do want to preface this video, and I kind of did this in my last couple of NEVS videos, by saying that all the people that post these articles online that have the hope that Saab is going to come back is not going to happen. I read specifically in one of these articles that Saab will not let NEVS use the Saab name, and even if the NEVS 9.3 did come back, it's not going to be anywhere near the same. Now you can argue that some of the Saab engineers that worked at Saab back when it was still a thing are now working on the NEVS 9.3, but even the NEVS 9.3 is now a pipe dream and very likely something that won't even happen. And I feel pretty confident saying that just based off of everything that I have just said. So without further ado, that's plenty of backstory. Let's go ahead and talk about this. This first article here is from The Drive. You can see they got a beautiful NEVS 9.3 sitting right here. Who knows, it could just be a regular 9.3 with a NEVS badge on the side. That's how similar they look. So these first few paragraphs here really just give the backstory that I just gave, talking about how NEVS first built a limited number of 9.3s, only delivered 420 units from 2013 to 2014 before shutting down production. The company had issues paying its creditors, leading to court action in 2014. In the wake of this, NEVS lost the right to use the Saab name. NEVS then spent much of the last decade touting its own modified EV 9.3 prototype, first seen in 2014. So it's been 7, almost 8 years since we first saw this thing. I understand that you can't take a car from a prototype to a production car overnight, but 8 years, it's not like they were completely reinventing the wheel. They're using a car and a chassis that was already in production for over a decade, so you know, it shouldn't take 8 years. So let's get to the really big, sad news here, or the disappointing news, and that is, first off, that the company also announced that it would lay off 300 of its 650 employees in Sweden in August this year. So 2 months ago, they laid off almost half of their workforce in Sweden. Now, it's saying here that NEVS could be valued up to $1 billion. There's another article I'm going to look at after this that goes more into the figures of how much in debt NEVS and Evergrande actually are, and it's pretty shocking. But for now, we'll just table that. But NEVS CEO is talking about how they're in dialogue with, you know, different people and companies about the direction they want to go about possibly selling their company. Reuters has mentioned that a smartphone manufacturer could end up purchasing a controlling stake in Evergrande NEV. I'm assuming what they meant to say NEVS, their automotive unit as a whole. That's really this first article from The Drive has to offer. I will link this one and the other one I'm going to reference down below in the description so you can read through them at full length if you'd like. But this next article here is from Automotive News Europe, and they talk about some of the more just staggering debt numbers. Like, for example, right here, they have more than $300 billion in debts. So that's a pretty crazy number. That's not NEVS, that's the whole Evergrande group who owns NEVS. So NEVS itself is not in $300 billion of debt. In fact, if a car company was $300 billion in debt, that would be very, that would be impressive. Here's another quote from NEVS CEO saying that they have enough cash and funds to last for a good while. But at the same time, right here, it literally says Evergrande has already missed 3 rounds of interest payments on its international bonds and has been scrambling to sell some of its assets to raise cash. So those are 2 very contradictory sentences within a paragraph of each other. So to me, I don't think they really have funds to last for a good while, which is sad to say, but it's really just the honest truth. I'm not an accountant or a financial advisor of any sorts, but common sense tells me that if your parent company is $300 billion in debt and they've missed their last 3 rounds of interest payments, you probably don't really have funds for a while. And I don't mean to be critical of what NEV's CEO is saying here. It's really just the truth. Another slightly concerning part is when Tilk says that NEVS is discussing a potential sale or other financing, mainly with European US firms, but declined to name them. So the fact that you're just kind of saying that you have investors or buyers lined up, but you won't name them, to me, you know, that very well could be true, but to me that kind of just seems like a bluff, at least given the history of what's happened with Evergrande, NEVS, and everything they promised, like I mentioned earlier, that has not come to fruition. I wouldn't be surprised if this is not necessarily true. Some of you will probably suggest that Koenigsegg should buy NEVS, or at least what's left of it. And while that seems like a great idea in theory, I don't know if Christian von Koenigsegg really wants to take on a company that is perpetually known for mishandling their money and going in debt. And you know, maybe, but again, I think that's another thing that could be a pipe dream. It would be something I would love to see, but I don't think it's really realistic. But I hope I'm wrong. Please prove me wrong, Koenigsegg and NEVS. Pretty much all the other information in this second article was already in the first piece from The Drive, so I'm not going to repeat any more of that. But that's really where we sit, guys, is NEVS and Evergrande are spiraling into uncontrollable debt. Well, they have been for some time. And they're now looking for either to sell, Evergrande's either looking to sell NEVS, or they're just trying to find new investors, or pretty much they need money or they need to ditch NEVS. So hopefully NEVS as a whole does not get shut down, but I guess we'll see what happens, because it seems like it has just been a fruitless endeavor so far. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Hopefully at some point I'll have a positive update on NEVS, but it just seems like every time I make a video on NEVS, it gets progressively more pessimistic with no positive news. So maybe we'll have some good news eventually, like I said. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you found it informative. and I'll see you all next time.
Take it easy.